we would like to introduce Riikka Korja. She's associate professor at the Turku University, a colleague, psychologist, and a Theraplay trainer and therapist, so very familiar with the Theraplay intervention too. And Riikka will also talk about the research she's doing in the FinBrain cohort study. And we are very happy, Riikka, to have you here as our second keynote speaker. So warmly welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Sarah and Hanna, for invitation. It's very, very nice to be here. It's kind of homecoming experience. And just shortly about my Theraplay background. So my first work as a clinical psychologist was in the department of small children's psychiatric, in the department of small children psychiatry in Helsinki University Hospital, where Jukka was a doctor, and he inspired me of this Theraplay method, and this Theraplay method was my first clinical training, so that was very important for me. But today I'm talking more as a researcher, and I'm also working in this FinBrain birth cohort project. And my title is Emotion Regulation Development in the Early Years, but at the first I want to say that I use a bit wider concept as emotional regulation. I'm talking more about self-regulation capacity, which include also emotional regulation. So here is here's a summary of my presentation. So at first I will shortly tell you about our sub-study of child development and parental functioning. And then I will tell a little bit about self-regulation development and of the concept of self-regulation. Then about self-regulation as a predictor of later development. And then shortly about factors affecting child self-regulation. And then shortly some implications. And I am very happy to discuss with you also during this presentation. Just please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments. Okay, so as Hasse already presented, FinBrain project is a large multi-professional pregnancy cohort study going on in Turku University. And Hasse and Linnea are leading this project, and I am very happy that I am able to be part of this project. I have been here in this project from year 2015, so like last 4 years, and it has been a very, very important experience for me. And this is a huge project which includes several different sub-studies. So I think we have at the moment like 12 or 13 sub-studies. So one sub-study is child development and parental functioning lab. And today I'm presenting more like results and studies from this sub-study. And first I present our study group. So in our sub-study we have 2 senior researchers, me and Linnea, and then we have 2 postdoc researchers, Saara Nolvi and Eva-Leena Kataja, and then 4 PhD students. And we all Linnea is child psychiatrist, but we all others are psychologists. And here you can see our study design. So in this child developmental sub-study, we are studying child's development at 4 different age points. And perhaps first I will shortly describe our sample in this sub-study. So for this sub-study, we are invited those families whose mothers have reported higher amount of prenatal stress during pregnancy. And in this case, we mean that they have reported either anxiety or depressive symptoms at least 2 times during pregnancy. So those children whose mothers have reported higher anxiety or depression are invited to this more intensive follow-up. And in addition, we have a control group including those children who mothers have reported only low level of any stress symptoms during pregnancy. So these two groups are invited to do more intensive follow-up, including child's assessments at 8 months, 30 months, 5 years, and then 9 years assessment is coming at year 2021. And in this psychological follow-up, we are interested in several areas of child's self-regulation. We are assessing child's temperament, emotional attention, and executive functioning at every age points. And emotional attention is assessed using eye movement tracking. And in addition, we are studying child's cognitive development at 30 months, at 5 years and 9 years, and also social competence and social skills at 5 years and 9 years. And of course, we are also interested in parent-child interaction. And unfortunately, we are not able to, we are studying only mothers, but we have assessed mother-infant interaction at every age points. So this is our study design. And data collection at 8 months and 30 months is already done. Yeah, and we are including pretty nice sample, including approximately 450 families in both 8 points. And at the moment, the sample collection at 5 years is going on, and it's continue until autumn 2020. And now I don't remember the exact number, but at the moment we have approximately 250 families participated already to the assessment at 5 years. And next step is to study children at 9 years. So the most interesting aspect in FinBrain is, of course, that we are able to combine this psychological data with biological data, which Hasse already introduced. So we have already done some studies where we have combined psychological data with gene data, MRI data, and data of cortisol levels. But today in my presentation I will mainly focus on this psychological data. And in addition to biological data, we are able to combine this data with other assessments going on in FinBrain, including like questionnaires done for the parents. And then I want to point out the last thing that in the scene there, that we are also assessing parental cognitive functions and emotional attentions at 12 and 30 months and at 5 years. And I think this has, at least for me, been very interesting, quite new aspect in this parenting behavior, that we are also evaluating these cognitive aspects of parenting. So this is our study design. And our aim in this sub-project is to obtain a detailed picture of the development and possible changes in child self-regulation, especially in the context of early life stress. And this early life stress in our study is reflecting this higher amount of maternal prenatal anxiety or depressive symptoms. And in addition, we are interested in these moderating factors, as Sarah already asked during Hasse's presentation, and we are mainly interested in the role of parenting in this development of child's self-regulation in the context of early life stress. And why we do this? Of course, we are aiming to get a more complete understanding of the earliest origins of psychopathology, so that we could offer some new information for the development and implementation to the evidence-based interventions. And perhaps I want to add that all researchers in this sub-study are also doing some clinical work, which is, I think, very important thing, and something which is different compared to several other international groups. So that's what I really like in what we are doing in Finland, that many of us have doing both. Okay, and then shortly background for why we are studying, how we should study child development. So we all know here, but it's also important to remind that child development is very complex thing, and child development is a complex transactional interplay with biological traits and family relationships and the effect of environment and social economical factors from the early pregnancy to the postpartum period. So when we are assessing child development, attention must be devoted to the study of the associations that change, maintain, and then change again the characteristics of the children. So this was seen already in the Hasse's presentation, that we really need to follow up these children, and we really need to try to do this research from the several different aspects. And perhaps at this point I would want to underline that we shouldn't forget the economical, social and community level when we're studying child development. So that's something I really think we should be always included. We should include to our research. So then to the topic of the presentation. So why we are interested in the development of child self-regulation? So we know, and I think you also know, that the self-regulation capacity is a key element for the psychological functioning and well-being. So what is self-regulation? Self-regulation capacity refers to the flexible regulation of cognition, behavior and emotions. So when we are talking about our capacity to regulate ourselves, we are talking about the ability to how we understand and manage our own behavior and thoughts and emotions and reactions in relation to our internal states and also to external demands. So how we can find a balance with internal states and external demands. And so that we could understand this complex pattern, we should study several different aspects of this capacity. So self-regulation include like two specific, separate but interacting components, so-called top-down components and bottom-up components. So top-down components are self-regulation is reflecting more like effortful control and executive processes, and bottom-up self-regulation components are reflecting more like reactive processes. And these bottom-up self-regulation include at least two important processes, like behavioral inhibition and fear, and then impulsivity. So how we are reacting to the different scary situations in the environment, or how impulsive we are in relation to our environment. So when we are talking about self-regulation from the very early phases of child's life, we are usually use a concept of temperament. So temperament refers to the constitutional individual differences in child's reactivity, activity, and in regulation. And differences in reactivity and regulations are relatively stable across time and contexts. And as Hasse already told, there is evidence indicating that there is a pretty strong genetic and neurobiological basics for these differences. And these differences in emotional reactivity or behavioral reactivity are seen and are evident from the very early phases of child's age. However, these more like cognitive or advanced skills, like aspects of self-regulations, including self-control, regulation capacity and effortful processes, are developing later in very close interaction with the environment. And the three main dimensions of child self-regulations are negative affectivity, positive affectivity or reactivity, and effortful control. So when we are assessing self-regulation capacity, we are usually are interested in these different aspects at least. So our negative reactivity and affect include elevated negative mood or irritability, or high intensity of emotions, or irregularity of biological rhythms, or inhibition. And then positive reactivity includes like a positive emotionality, joyfulness, responsiveness, extroversions, and impulsivity. And these are separate constructs. So child can be like both. She can be like she can have aspects from positive reactivity, and she can have some aspect from negative affectivity. So these are not, you know, from the same variable. And then the third aspect of the self-regulation is the ability to manage attention, inhibition, or activate behavior as needed to adapt. And so that this is the effortful control. So that was kind of like the definition of the concept of self-regulation in the context we have been doing our research. So we have pretty strong evidence indicating that these characteristics of early childhood self-regulation are related to several aspects of later mental health. So aspects of negative reactivity or increased activity level have shown to be related to the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, conduct disorder, autism spectrum disorders, depression, and childhood anxiety disorders. And then this aspect of negative reactivity, like behavioral inhibition, has shown to be related to anxiety disorders during childhood and adolescence. And these problems in poor self-regulation has shown to be related with, for example, greater risks for substance abuse, sexual risk-taking, and physical illness. So these kind of associations have been found. But very important here is to see that the development of the possible psychopathology is only strongly dependent on the environmental factors. So these personality traits or the early traits of our temperament, they are not like signs of psychopathology. They are sign of psychopathology when they are combined with the non-optimal environment. So this is important here. And this effect of environment can start already during pregnancy, as Hasse already told. So important factor is here how child's environment is able to support child's individual characteristics and needs. We know that child is comprehensively dependent on the adult's regulation, especially during first year. Child self-regulation capacity is formed in the early interaction with close relationships during first 2 years. So when, based on the child development research, we can say that the capacity of child self-regulation can be measured quite well at when the child is 2 years old. Okay, next I will talk a little bit about which factors are affecting self-regulation. And this is something Hasse already presented shortly. But we know that the early life, that we are assuming strongly at the moment in a stress research, that early stress exposure and its effects on the development of self-regulation system is one key element in increasing the risk of later child psychopathology. So this is kind of one key element in the development of later child psychopathology. And one aspect, one way to measure, or one form of early life stress is maternal psychological distress, including chronic stress, anxiety or depression, either during pregnancy or during postpartum. And here I definitely want to address the same which was addressed previously, that when we are talking about prenatal stress, we are talking about toxic stress. So we have done a systematic review of the studies evaluating the association between prenatal anxiety or stress and child's emotional regulation. And this review is very strongly indicated that prenatal anxiety and stress increase the risk for emotional and self-regulatory difficulties during the first 2 years of life. And this was found also after the effect of postpartum factors were controlled. So we know all here that postnatal life is strongly affecting child's life, but these studies are showing that already prenatal stress exposure is independently affecting child's emotional regulation. And here Hasse already presented this mechanism which we are thinking, what we are thinking how prenatal stress is affecting child's self-regulation during pregnancy. So we are using this prenatal programming model concept here. So when we are thinking how maternal stress is affecting child, we are assuming that it's mainly happening through different intrauterine processes, including functioning of the placenta, changes in immunological milieu, nutritional supply, and in the HPA axis activity. Okay, so that was the shortly how already prenatal experiences are affecting child's self-regulation independently. But then, after child's birth, of course, the programming effect continues. We have several studies indicating that also postnatal life experiences are affecting child's behavior, and so we can kind of say that the programming effect from pregnancy is continues also after birth. So then there is several different mechanisms how it goes after birth. So one which is perhaps the widely known here is that when there is early life stress in the context where a child is living, it's possible that this early life stress or maternal anxiety, depression is affecting child's maternal caretaking behavior, and in that way affecting child's regulation. But we are assuming that that's not the only way how it's affected. One what was presenting already in Hasse's presentation that, for example, cortisol levels in mother's milk is one possible way how this programming effect can continue after birth. Okay. So here I have short summary of 2 PhD studies done in FinBrain project. So Saara Nolvi, who is now doing postdoc research in this area, and especially Saara is interested how this child's emotional regulation is related to changes in brain development. But in her PhD studies, she studied the role of early life stress in shaping infant fear reactivity and executive functioning. And here you can see a summary of Saara's findings. And you can see, as same as Hasse have already told, that these are very complex things we are studying. But if we just shortly say what we are seeing here, that we see that both prenatal stress and postnatal stress are related to child's fear reactivity and executive functioning. You can definitely see here differences in sex. And these are quite interesting, I think, but I want to underline here that at least I cannot say what are the mechanisms behind these sex differences. But you can see that milk cortisol concentration is affected, observed fear reactivity in girls, and postnatal and chronic stress symptoms in mothers are affecting negatively child's executive functioning in girls. And then prenatal stress is affecting child's fear reactivity and overall negative reactivity in both sexes, in both boys and girls. Okay, and then another PhD study done in our project is the Eva-Lena's project, where she showed that maternal prenatal distress symptoms are associating with maternal working memory errors. So Eva-Lena has been especially interested how maternal executive functions and cognitive functions may moderate the effect of prenatal stress. And she also showed that maternal depressive symptoms during pregnancy and postpartum period affected infant processing of treat in relation to other facial expressions when we assessed emotional attention using eye movement tracking. And in addition, maternal prenatal anxiety were associated with higher threat bias in infants. Now I want to check my time, so I have time until, okay, so now I have to be quicker. So the important aspect here is what we were already talking previously, that not all infants show detrimental effects from stress exposure. Individual characteristics affect individual sensitivity to different stress exposures. So this is important to remember that different children respond differently to same parenting behavior or same environment factors. So children vary in how sensitive they are to parenting and other environment influences. So here you can see this, which is I think quite important aspect here. So that in left you can see, if you think this line which is going here, so in left part you see those children who are more sensitive to the environment, who are reporting more negative reactivity during infancy. And when they are living in the environment with non-optimal parenting, the developmental outcome is low. But when they are living in positive environment, including positive optimal parenting, their development is going very high. Whereas the children with indicating not specific sensitivity during infancy, they are doing pretty well in both environments. So this is important aspect. But here it's very important to remember that these studies are not done in high risk samples. So this is more like a normative sample, but it's very important to remember also in the clinical context. So we definitely should notify those children who are more sensitive to environment. So then to the role of parental care. So the quality of early caregiving practices and the quality of attachment, of course, has a crucial role there, how the early life stress is affecting child. So good parenting may diminish the adverse effects on early life stress, and low quality in caretaker behavior may in itself be stressful for the infant. So now I will shortly present some recent FinBrain studies. So we were interested how different patterns of caretaking behavior may affect different patterns in child's self-regulation. And in this study we were interested in two aspects of caretaking behavior: unpredictability of behavior, caretaking behavior, and maternal sensitivity in caretaking behavior. And we studied how these are related to child's self-regulation. And maternal sensitivity, which is a well-known factor for you, was assessed using emotional availability scales. And then the other aspect of caretaking was predictability of care. And I will present this more in detail. I just want to first remind that already Mary Ainsworth were addressing that predictability of parental behavior is crucial for a child. But we haven't had very good measurements to study predictability of parental behavior. And novel stress research have raised this question again to the field of early life stress. So Professor Alicia Davis and Tally Parham have addressed that the degree of predictability of maternal sensory signals may be a pathway by which high-quality maternal care is affecting developing brain. And they have developed these very interesting new measurements, and we have been very happy that we have been able to do close collaboration in this project. So they have developed this new system to analyze interaction. So there we are assessing how predictable are maternal signals in interaction. What are done here is that from 10 minutes video recorded interaction situations, first all maternal signals are coded to the real time, to the moment-to-moment time scale using the observer program. So all auditory signals, visual signals and tactile signals are listed to that moment-to-moment time scale. And very important here is that those signals must be related to the child. So child needs to be she needs to be in that interaction. So after this coding, we have approximately 1,000 signals from the interaction from 10 minutes situation. And after that, we will we will calculate the entropy rate of these signals. So we are using this mathematical, based to the machine learning system, which is calculating, is there some predictable pattern which mom is repeating in the interaction, or is it like incoherent interaction with no predictability? So we will have this mathematical score called entropy rate. And high entropy rate is indicating a lot of chaos, and low is indicating no chaos. So are you in? Do you need more clarification for this? So this was, I think, for me, very interesting new way to see interaction, because I have done interaction studies last 20 years and used more traditional interaction measures, which are also very good, but it was very fascinating to be able to study this very new way. So Alicia Davis and Parham developed this system, and they produced the first study indicating that predictability associates cognitive development both in humans and in rat offsprings. Unfortunately, because of the time, I have no time to explain this more in detail, but the degree of predictability of maternal signals influence memory function in the rat offspring, and also it associates with human child better cognitive behavior at 2 and 6.5 years. So more predictable mom was, the better was the cognitive behavior. So the next study was that we studied how this predictability of the care is related to child's self-regulation. And we were able to do a close collaboration between this study from United States and in our project. And interestingly, we found in both cohorts very similar findings, showing that this unpredictable care associated with child's self-regulation at 12 months in both cohorts. And as a researcher, you are always very excited when you have two different cohorts and very similar findings. So this finding was found in spite of the fact that these samples were very different in relation to socioeconomical background factors and so on. So, unpredictable maternal care was associated with poor self-regulation capacity during toddlerhood from 1 year to 2 years. After the effects of maternal distress, maternal aids, maternal sensitivity or maternal income were controlled. So this was found. But in our project, in FinPray, we were also interested in the role of maternal sensitivity. And interestingly, we found that maternal sensitivity at 8 months associated with the scale of negative reactivity at 12 months. And same was found after the effects, the same covariates were used in the model. And interestingly, maternal sensitivity was not related to the other aspect of self-regulation. So maternal sensitivity was related to negative affectivity, and unpredictability was related to the effortful control, more to the self-regulation capacity. So our main conclusion in this study was that when we are studying the role of early caretaking, I think we should use quite wide to study different aspects of the caretaking, because we found that both unpredictable signals and low sensitivity in maternal care were affecting child self-regulation. However, the effects were found on the different aspects in child's emotional regulation. Predictability was predicting effortful control, and sensitivity, negative reactivity. Okay, so that was the summary of our findings. So, okay, so now it's very difficult to see how long it takes, but anyway, now I want to, at this point, summarize what I have been talking. So, what I think, based on what I have learned in this FinPray project and in these studies relating to child self-regulation, prenatal stress, and caretaking, I think important is that child's individual characteristics should be notified from the very early developmental phases. Very crucial would be that we could find those children who are the most sensitive to the environment. And then when we have a sensitive child, we should be exploring what are the aspects of her self-regulation capacity which are the most sensitive, which needs more from the environment. So different aspects of child self-regulation may be affected by the different aspects of parenting behavior. And in the clinical context, I think it would be essential to develop targeted interventions, so that we should take into account the specificity of the child, and also think what kind of caretaking behavior this child needs. And then to the more like implications. Now when I have been working in this FinPray project, so I think I'm more and more interested also the family situations, also not only about the quality of family relationships, but also the context where families are living. Because I think we really should explore how stressful is this environment where a child is living with her parent. Because parent and child self-regulation do not function as well when there are many chronic stressors. So when we are doing research or clinical work, we should explore these stressors quite widely. So Kirby Dieter Descartes has addressed that if families have more than two of these examples of risk or stressors, the amount of stress is too much. So it's not only the amount of one kind of stress, but it's amount of different chronic stress factors. So when we are supporting these families, I think we should in addition to give a personal support and treatment to the individuals, we should do interventions where we could diminish the parental stress in every possible way, in personal level, in family level, in peer level, and in a societal level. And this was the picture Hasse already presented, but we definitely should remember here the societal level and that our government should really notify that early investment is the investment is here crucial when we are thinking child brain development. And perhaps also here, in addition to giving support to the family relationship and parenting, we should remember parental self-regulation skills and capacities. So prevention and intervention efforts also should focus on educating parents about warning signs of low self-regulation and offer some strategies how they could maintain their self-regulation skills and capacities. And in relation to this new measurement of predictability, which is, I think, it's interesting and something new, but I think it's not very big surprise that we are interested in predictability at the moment, nowadays, because I think there is a lot of things going on at this moment which are kind of affecting child's environment so that it's not so predictable that it should be. So this predictable thing is, when we are thinking the predictability of the environment, it's of course we have to think how these the use of mobile phones and iPads and so on are affecting child-parent interaction. So we should do all we can do that parents would be more aware the role of predictable and interaction, so that they could think how they use these mobile phones and so on in their everyday life. Okay, but what else we need to do when we are supporting families and child's early self-regulation development? We have to support early family relationships. And we should do all we can do that so that parents and families could offer good enough interaction with their children. And what are the important aspects in the good enough interaction? They are joy and play, structure and challenge, engagement and caretaking and nurture. And that's something what you have done at least last 20 years. So I think you have done very nice work, so I want to congratulate you. Paljon onnea, Theraplay-yhdistys, and I want to thank you for your attention. And in this slide, I kind of summarized the key message of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Riikka, so much for this wonderful presentation and interesting new results also. I mean, we have time to go to lunch, but you will be here today. So if people have questions, I'm sure you might, we will address you later.
Yeah.
I think what I take out of this is your slide, like how to target vulnerable children, how to target the most vulnerable children. And one answer is the predictability of the sensitive caretaking and other things you mentioned. So thank you so much, Riikka and Hasse too. Yes. Okay. And we will give Hasse and Riikka small light to their, dark November nights to comfort you with your hard science. And I hope you are able to stay with us. today, and we have time for lunch, so 1 hour, you know where to go. Please come back at 1 o'clock when we start. Okay.